takes a knee. It's one of the biggest wins in Duke football history. Down goes Clemson. The Devils win it 28-7.
We're going to have some fun tonight in Durham, Mr. Pash.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Blue Devil Blitz. I'm your host, Ranjan Jindal, here with my co-host, Caleb Dudley. Caleb, how are you doing, man?
I'm good. It's good to be back for another episode.
Yeah, man, it's good. This is a very special episode because in just a couple minutes, we are going to have Caroline Wills and Emma Moon of the Daily Tar Heel, the sports editor and assistant sports editor over there, are going to come join us to preview the North Carolina game. Duke football will face North Carolina this weekend in a homecoming game. It'll be a big matchup, and we'll talk about that. And then right now, we'll also recap Duke's past two games against UConn and Middle Tennessee, where the Blue Devils emerged undefeated and are still 4-0. But first, this podcast is brought to you by the Duke Stores. Support your favorite Duke team, home to the only collection of merchandise in the world that comes to you straight from Duke University. Go to shop.duke.edu for all your Duke merch. So yeah, like I mentioned, Duke defeated both UConn and Middle Tennessee, but very different games. UConn was at home, and the Blue Devils won 26-21. It was a little, close there in the second half. The Huskies were able to come back in the third quarter with a couple offensive touchdowns and really made things difficult on a really stingy Blue Devil defense. But Duke was able to pull that out and then traveled to Murfreesboro, Tennessee, to take on Middle Tennessee. And the Blue Raiders scored on their first drive on an explosive play, but then from there, it was all Blue Devils. There was a lightning delay for a couple hours in there. It was a long game, but Duke was dominant and won 45-17. Forced 4 turnovers from Middle Tennessee, so really great showing from the Blue Devil defense. What did you see from those two games, and what was your just overall analysis from those two for the Blue Devils?
Yeah, you just mentioned two very different games, and I would agree, but one thing that was constant in my eyes was the play of Star Thomas. Jacquez Moore is still out with injury. Do we know if he'll be back for?
Diaz says he's hopeful, so we'll see.
Okay.
He's been a full participant in practice.
But in his stead, Star Thomas has been outstanding. The grad transfer from New Mexico State. He had 122 yards against UConn on 22 carries, no scores. And then he had 111 against Middle Tennessee and 2 touchdowns. So he's been really good. The run game has been excellent, and it's really allowed Malik Murphy to open up the field on offense.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think Star's been phenomenal. I would also say for Malik, it's been interesting because he's connected on some deep shots, but he just hasn't been completely, in rhythm in all 4 quarters. And I think what Diaz has really emphasized is Duke's played some really, really good quarters of football, but also just some where there's some lapses of focus and things like that. So the team needs to play 4, quality quarters of football. But the defense kind of got back to its last year ways against Middle Tennessee with the turnover forcing. One of the things that the Blue Devils did really, really well with last season was turning over the ball. But once again, getting in the backfield and wreaking havoc. Duke now leads the country, is back on top and leading the country in tackles for loss. But I'm also really impressed with the secondary, which feels like it's kind of emerged as one of the strengths of this team, really, even after losing a few veterans last year. Terry Moore's been excellent. So has Chandler Rivers and Stinson. So that's been really impressive for me, watching the secondary play and really limit opposing quarterbacks.
Yeah, I think it was good for Duke to have another game where they had to face some adversity against UConn. Obviously, not a lot of resistance against Middle Tennessee State, but having a game at home where you really had to have your back against the wall and come back in the second half, I think will be good for them in the long run.
Yeah, Diaz said after, he said something like, knowing the team, has the ability to win, and using those hard situations, learning how to win in the fourth quarter will be key down the stretch, because I do think there's going to be a lot of fourth quarter games for Duke, and possibly this weekend will be one as well. So knowing how to win and not panic was something that I was really impressed with from Duke. All right, so like I mentioned earlier, today we have 2 very special guests joining our podcast from the Daily Tar Heel. We have Caroline Wills, who's the sports editor, and Emma Moon, the assistant sports editor. Caroline, thank you so much for joining us.
Of course.
We talked about a fun fact beforehand. Do you have a fun fact you want to share with us?
Of course. I love sharing fun facts.
Okay.
My fun fact today is that my dad was a high school basketball coach forever, and he would always have a summer basketball camp. And from age 4 to 10, I was always forced to go to this basketball camp. And every time I would cry the whole time. I hated it so much. Fun fact, I love basketball now, but I just hated having to play basketball. I don't really know what was going on. I didn't know what I was thinking at that time.
Did you play other sports or did you just?
I played tennis.
Okay.
In
Oh,
high
I played
school.
tennis.
Yeah,
too.
I played
Cool.
tennis.
Okay.
Nothing related to basketball. Didn't want my father coaching me. Love you, Dad. Did not want you being my coach. And specifically, what would trigger the tears was we'd always do this one drill where we would like dribble between the legs. Couldn't do it. It would frustrate me so bad at 4 years old, and I just
At 4, he was making you dribble between the legs.
I know it's ridiculous.
You got to start early.
You got to start early. You got to start the ball knowledge early. And then the best part was we'd play knockout or some other games, and his players would always like pick me up and like help me shoot the balls because I couldn't do it. I was like really small, but shout out them, shout out basketball, shout out my dad.
Well, wonderful. I'm glad you like it now.
That's what matters
you do
now.
go to a school that's quite good at basketball. All right, I'll turn over to Emma. Emma has a really exciting one, I think.
You know, in the spirit of being at Duke University, even though I go to UNC Chapel Hill, my brother is named after the legend Christian Laettner. So shout out Christian Moon. But yeah, my family's a big Duke family, so I get into a lot of fights with them about this stuff like that.
That's crazy. Okay, Caleb, I know, was a Duke fan growing up.
I was.
Yeah, you were.
Yeah.
But that's fun. So today we're going to talk a little bit about what has happened and transpired for UNC football and preview this exciting matchup this weekend because, like I mentioned before, UNC has come to town at 4 p.m. this Saturday to take on the Blue Devils for a homecoming game, big Centennial weekend. Ed Sheeran is coming to town week. We briefly discussed that earlier. But I'm going to start with the elephant in the room because I'm sorry, guys. Last week, full disclosure, I did text Caroline like last week, and we were like, I hope both teams are 4-0 coming into this weekend, and Duke held up its end of the bargain.
I think Mac Brown wanted that 4-0 competition as well, but he mentioned that he was like, I want 4-0 both teams. Didn't happen.
So what happened in that game? Duke lost 70-50 to James Madison. What was y'all's take on the game? Why do you think that happened? Overall analysis.
I mean, it was just an overall collapse. It started with the defense.
Yeah.
The defense just reverted back to its usual tendencies of not stopping anything and just letting JMU run the ball, throw the ball downfield anytime they wanted. JMU literally got anything they wanted. Anytime you saw them in the end zone, they were probably catching a wide open pass. It was absolutely ridiculous. And it was completely just a collapse, I would say. And then you also had special teams blunders where they weren't prepared for an onside kick, despite the fact that the entire sideline was yelling onside kick, and it hits the guy square in the chest and bounces over to JMU. And everything was horrible. Everything was not going right for them.
Yeah, I completely agree. Following, the game, and even I went to a press conference on Monday, and Mac Brown spoke, and a lot of I don't knows. He had no answers for how they played. He said it was a great week of practice, and then they just committed errors and mistakes, and like you said, a complete collapse that he just hadn't prepared for and didn't even know could happen. Barnett, James Madison's quarterback, threw for 388 yards. James Madison rushed for 223. So just tore the defense right up. Again, I think I can't emphasize this enough, and Caroline already said this, but a complete collapse in most areas. He had very few things to say positively about the game, but a lot of I don't knows, and Mac Brown didn't know what to say about the loss.
I think the most startling stat to me was that JMU had 611 total yards on offense.
Wow, yeah.
And I mean, that's a group of 5 team. Like, that's just not really the standard or the expectation.
Yeah. A couple more stats. James Madison, 70 points on Saturday, tied for the most UNC has ever allowed in a game. The last time that happened was East Carolina in 2014.
Caleb was a big East Carolina fan. I just remember that. North Carolina.
I was at that game. I do remember that.
Yeah. The Duke's 53 first half points for the most the Tar Heels have ever allowed in one half, and the most points JMU has ever scored in a half, and the most points a Group 5 team has scored versus a Power 4 opponent in one half since 2012.
Wow.
So a lot of records if you're UNC you don't want to have.
Them. Caleb, I was only able to watch the second half because I was coming back from an event. But what did you see as well from that game that you kind of took away?
Yeah, I tuned in about midway through the first quarter, and UNC's had games in the past couple of years, like I think at App State, where they've kind of hung with the Group of 5 team and then pulled away. and the opposite of that happened. The second quarter was like a total collapse for UNC. It was 25-21, and it ended up being 53-21 at halftime. And so it was astounding to me. I couldn't believe they couldn't take care of the ball.
Yeah.
Criswell had to go out for I think one play because his helmet came off, and then Connor Harrell came in and fumbled the snap on the first play. They turned it over, and then just not seeing the reads, making errant throws. Just not a team that seemed prepared to play.
Yeah, astounding is the word to use here.
Yeah, it seemed like, at least through the first 3 games of the season, the defense did look a little bit better than in years past. I know you brought in Jeff Collins to be the defensive coordinator. It seemed like that, especially against Minnesota, played pretty well. But yeah, like you mentioned, just was not able to execute on any of the 3 phases of the ball. I want to flip over and talk about the offense because there's been kind of, quarterback situation here at North Carolina. Max Johnson goes out against Minnesota in a pretty gruesome injury. First of all, very glad he's okay, and surgery went well. But then I know they tested out Connor Harrell a little bit, and now falling back to Jacoby Criswell. What has the quarterback situation been like between Harrell and Criswell? And if Criswell is the starter against Duke, what can Duke fans expect to see from him under center?
Yeah, so it was unclear kind of what the quarterback situation was going to look like heading into the season. There was a bit of a quote-unquote quarterback battle, but apparently Max Johnson was the obvious starter. So then he goes down, and then Connor goes into the Charlotte game, does okay. There was a couple rough start stuff, but kind of figured it out, played okay. And then against NC Central, Connor got to play a little bit in the beginning, and apparently there was this discussion between Mac Brown, the coaching staff, and both quarterbacks that Jacoby Criswell was going to come in for the 3rd series. And so it was very interesting timing because Connor was not playing well. NC Central basically stormed down the field in their first drive, scored a touchdown. Connor could not replicate that kind of effort, and so he was taken out, but apparently that was the plan all along. Jacoby Criswell comes in, and from the get-go, he is poised, he is confident, he's making his passes. It's pretty much UNC scored a touchdown as soon as he came in, and there was a very obvious shift, I think, in expectations for the quarterback room after that. And then I think JMU was Jacoby's first
real start, yeah.
And for the most part, he was obviously overshadowed by the absolute disaster that happened on Saturday, but for the most part, Jacoby played pretty well.
Yeah.
He was completing his throws. He was, leading the offense to a 50-point performance. That's nothing to be ashamed of. A couple of interceptions were, not great, not helpful, but for the most part, it was kind of an improvement. And then especially when you have Connor come in for one snap of the game and he immediately fumbles the ball. The contrast is just very obvious, and that just really comes down to Jacoby has just appeared to be a very confident and poised quarterback, and Connor is just very nervous.
Yeah,
I think hasn't overcome that.
Yeah, I think confidence is the word there to use. Jacoby was at UNC for 3 seasons, transferred, and then came back, which is kind of unheard of. So he's kind of used to UNC. And this summer, when he came in and they had a press conference and he was there, he was like, I'm going to lead UNC to an ACC championship. And Drake May never did that. And I think it takes some confidence to say that.
That is pretty crazy.
Yeah. So he just has a certain confidence that I think Connor lacks. And I think an important stat to bring up is Jacoby Criswell still threw for 475 yards against JMU. Granted, it was a 50-70 game, So again, played decently, and Mac Brown emphasized that if there is a positive to take away from the JMU game, it was that Jacoby made some surprising plays that he didn't really expect. So I think there is a confidence issue with Connor Harrell, and he doesn't have the experience. He's only a sophomore. He redshirted, I think, last season or the season before, but doesn't have much experience. And I think even if Jacoby lacks experience, he's still been with the UNC offense for 3 years prior, and just has maybe some, we mentioned this, but, confidence, experience that Harrell lacks.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's pretty safe to say that on Saturday, everyone can expect Jacoby Criswell to be starting.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, I was interesting because I was telling Caleb before the season that I was a big fan of Connor Harrell, and I was like, this guy might be really good ahead of Max Johnson, but he's definitely still very young and doesn't have much experience. I think the talent is there, but like you said, the confidence piece is very key. Caleb, I know you've talked about Criswell a little bit. What do you think what challenges do you think he can present for the Blue Devil defense?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, they just said,
Mhm.
I mean, he threw for 475 yards. Obviously,
Yeah.
he's very capable throwing the ball downfield. Duke has been pretty good so far defending the pass, but granted, hasn't played really a good quarterback all year necessarily.
Yeah.
And obviously, UNC has plenty of weapons on offense. And so I think, if he can just stay to the script, not do anything like abhorrent, like some of the throws that happened against James Madison, I think he can definitely lead the UNC offense to a capable showing.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's preview this game a little bit. Again, 4 p.m. this Saturday. Everyone pull out. It's going to be a sellout, I think. Well, student section is sold out. Student tickets sold out fast, which like for Duke is a pretty rare experience on the football end. But I think it'll definitely be an exciting atmosphere. What do you guys think that North Carolina needs to do to win? Obviously, I mean, the morale from last week, like you guys mentioned, is not super high, and there was a lot of controversy and storylines coming from the program. But obviously, this is a big game, regardless. What do you think that the team needs to do to pull off this one in Wallace Wade this weekend?
I mean, it truly comes down to the defense. The defense has to step up. I mean, right now, they're the baseline for morale. They're the baseline for the level of play they're able to actually have on Saturday. Because if they just come out and they're terrible and they're just letting Duke storm down the field and get whatever they want, like, the offense can't keep up with that. It's an impossible standard to be expected to be perfect the entire night and not to make any mistakes and to keep up with high scoring and go against the Duke's defense. I don't know that that's a fair standard to just expect the defense to do whatever they do and the offense just make up for it. It's going to come down to the defense.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree. And just talking about morale, I mean, this is cliche, but I think you got to apply the 24-hour rules. We sit in this loss and then move on.
Yeah.
And I think that they're trying to employ that, but whenever your head coach kind of does go into the locker room after the game and say, do you believe in me? Like, are you confident with me moving forward? And that's the coach leading your program, then that can affect a team a little bit. So I think morale is just low. And I think there are two scenarios here where they just spiral even more, or this is kind of like, let's redefine the season. Let's go out here and beat Duke. There's a lot of inexperience with this team. Jacoby Criswell, third string quarterback. We talked about it. A lot of young people. Their O-line before the season only had one real start. So it's just, a very, very inexperienced team against a Duke team that I think has a few veteran pieces. So I think, they're just going to have to go out there. And again, it starts with the defense. You can't let a team score 70 on you. But I think that,
That'll do it.
that'll do it. That'll do it. So I think that they just have to kind of flush away whatever this last week was, this last game, and all the horrible records that are associated with it, and just go in here and, fix any mistake that they can.
Yeah. All right, Caleb, we'll turn the question on its head. What do you think Duke needs to do, to defeat UNC? Obviously, the team will come in very motivated to continue their streak in this series.
Yeah, I think the most glaring advantage Duke has is, after watching the James Madison game, is the ability to throw the ball downfield.
Yeah.
North Carolina did not have a lot of success defending the downfield pass against James Madison, and Malik Murphy is not afraid, as we've seen in the first 4 games, to let it rip. And so I think it's really important for Duke to kind of hit a big player too early, just because on the other side they have the best running back in the conference, I think, by far. And
Wait, tell your story to them about.
Yeah. So Amarion Hampton
Sorry to cut
played him in high school.
Oh no! Oh no! Oh no! Oh no!
2 years in a row in the playoffs. Did not go well.
So say, how did that end?
Caleb's a defensive player, so he
lost both. First one was pretty close. Second year, not as close. It was like December, so every time you hit him, it felt like you were getting like a freight train was hitting.
Oh no!
But yeah, so
sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, but so back to the actual game. Yeah, so I mean, North Carolina has probably the most talented running back in the conference, if not the entire country, and for a Duke defense that's been priding itself on getting in the backfield and getting tackles for loss, he's a guy that takes more than one hit to bring him down. So it's going to be really tough for Duke to kind of limit that run game. They've had some troubles even against lesser running backs so far this season, like Cam Porter, Northwestern, Cradle from Middle Tennessee broke off a big one this week. And so for them, I think they just need to jump out early and kind of make UNC match them throwing the ball, because if they allow North Carolina to start just running the ball with Hampton, they could be in trouble.
Yeah, I agree. I think for the offense, what's happened for Duke a couple times is it's been like quick 3 and outs, or has not been on the field very much, because Malik Murphy will miss deep balls, though they're very close, but he'll either overthrow someone a little bit or it'll be close. And you want to stay on the field against this UNC defense and kind of wear them out. And I think for Malik, his confidence will be key because even against Middle Tennessee, the offense didn't have a lot of rhythm. And so establishing that early against UNC will be important. And then on the defensive side, like you said, obviously stopping Marion Hampton. But I also think the secondary will be big because that's kind of been the strength of this team, actually. And Terry Moore has been a great cover corner, and UNC's got some good weapons. And like we said, Chris Will can throw the ball down the field. So I think continuing that, limiting big plays, I think it'll be a fun, high-scoring one, but that'll be important to maybe get a turnover or two from Chris Will because he did throw a couple interceptions against James Madison. If you can force those, that'll be big in the game. All right, let's do some game picks. How about that, guys? Let's do some score picks.
Oh, boy.
Caroline, I'll start with you.
All right.
Score.
I'm going to repeat the same score prediction I had for Herc the Pod
earlier
this weekend. 45-35 Duke. I have seen enough of the UNC defense. This is my final call. I'm done with them. I think that they're going to blow it once again, and Duke's just going to take advantage.
UNC defense, if you're listening, you have a doubt.
Yeah. Caroline Wills is out for you.
Apologies in advance.
Yeah.
UNC defense.
All right, Emma.
I'm going to go 41-31 Duke as well. Caroline hit the nail on the head, the defense. And I think we mentioned this earlier, but it's just hard to come back from a loss like that and go immediately into a rivalry game that's, not at home, but they have to go on the road rivalry game. And I just think that morale is too low with all of the rumors with Mac Brown and just all of that stuff that I don't know if they have ever had the confidence this season, but I don't know. I feel like the UNC football program is at a really, really low point.
It's definitely been depleted.
It's depleted. And I think that, here are two things. I said this earlier, but they either go in there and this is kind of a comeback victory for them, or they lose and the season somehow just goes even in more peril. But again, 41-31 Duke.
All right, Caleb.
I think it'll be a little closer than that, and Duke won't score as many points. 40 plus. I think 31-28 Duke. I think the biggest thing, honestly, is last year it was double overtime in Chapel Hill.
Yeah.
And really what it came down to, I was there at the game, and it just seemed like they had Drake May, and so they won. Because he made some plays that just were unreal. Some throws that seemed near impossible. And so I think for the first time in a while, Duke's facing a UNC team that doesn't have a demigod at quarterback. So I think for them, the home field advantage, and then with the UNC struggles in defense, Duke should be able to pull it out.
Yeah, one thing, this can't be good that we're all about to pick Duke here, but I will say, coming off of that performance, Jeff Collins and Mac Brown probably had a crazy week are going to have a crazy week of practice. So I wonder if the defense comes in and has a little extra edge after everyone telling them, especially Caroline, that they're not good, they can't do it. I'm also gonna say close to Caleb's. I'm gonna go 31-23 Duke. I think 31-23. I think it'll be a little bit lower scoring. But I'm not sure if Duke's offense is, they've usually had help from their defense because the defense has been so good in forcing turnovers and stuff. But the Duke offense needs to create sustained drives consistently. And I don't know if they've been able to do that or they will be able to, but it'll be a big confidence boost for Malik Murphy if he can. So I'm going to go with Duke winning by 8 with the home field advantage. But yeah, so UNC, congratulations, you have won the game now that we all four just picked Duke. But that's not the only football game this week between Duke and North Carolina.
Oh.
We're going to be traveling to take on the Daily Tar Heel. Was it a double overtime game last year?
Yes.
Yes,
I remember.
Yep.
We need to get Dom in here. So Thursday night, we're going to be the Chronicle and the Daily Tar Heel will go at it. They're going to host this time. Their home field advantage, so that might lead to a victory there, but that'll be fun. And then, all our rivalry coverage will be out this week. I guess I'll ask you guys, what's going on the Daily Tar Heel? What can people read, advertise your stuff? I know you guys have some great coverage out, so what can people read from the Daily Tar Heel?
Well, Emma is currently working on a game preview for Saturday's game.
Yes.
That will hopefully be out either Wednesday or Thursday. Mm-hmm. And then we also have last week's coverage from the JMU game if anybody is, really wanting to read that.
Yeah.
But...
Yeah. Okay. I'll say, if the Daily Tar Heel wins on Thursday, I will be writing a silly little story about it. So look forward to that.
And
I also want to admit something that I did buy a whistle for this flag football game.
We are very serious about this.
Oh, this will be good.
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna be locked. We got to bring our A game.
Yeah.
Caleb's locked in. Okay, awesome. Well, yeah, definitely check out their site at thedailytarheel.com. Hark the Pod is the name of the podcast.
Yeah.
Check that out as well. They do a great job. And thanks you guys so much for coming. We'll be right back. Okay, so back here with Caleb. That was a great preview from North Carolina. Thanks again to Caroline and Emma. Now we'll do some ACC talk. We'll do our weekly stock up, stock down. It's ending non-conference season. Conference play got started for a few teams last week. Caleb, I'll start with you. Who's your stock up, stock down for the week?
Yeah, I'll start with down. Virginia Tech had another loss to traditionally not very good Power 5 team, or Power 4, I guess now, but they lost to Rutgers this past week.
Fighting Jay Patel.
At home. So that's 2 losses to 2 usually bottom feeder Power 4 schools in Vanderbilt and Rutgers. I know Vanderbilt has looked better than expected thus far, but still. I know there was high hopes for the Hokies coming into the season with the roster they had, and this really hasn't just come to fruition yet. It doesn't get any easier. They're playing at Miami this week. Probably the toughest game on their schedule. So they're my stock down, and then stock up is Pitt. Pitt has looked really good. They're 4-0. They had a great comeback against West Virginia. That was like insane. Eli Holstein has been really good in his first season as a starter after transfer from Alabama. Without Rodney Hammond, the run game still looks great. So Pitt thus far has really surprised me, and we'll see how far they can go. But so far, they're my stock up.
They found the craziest way to win, three times against West Virginia and Cincinnati. It was just insane. They are very good. Okay. Let's see here. For my stock down, I'm gonna go with Syracuse. I don't want to overreact to one game, but I will say the loss against Stanford was disappointing because, I think Syracuse is a talented team, and if Kyle McCord can take care of the ball, they're going to be really dangerous and tough to beat. But he had a pretty good overall game, both with, over the air, and he scored a touchdown on the ground as well. But he did throw 2 costly picks in that game, which really helped Stanford. And I was impressed with Stanford and Ashton Daniels. He made a couple good throws at the end, but Syracuse, you left Elik Ayamanor wide open not wide open, but in one-on-one coverage on a crucial play on the last drive, which was a little bit of a questionable call on my end. And so I thought Stanford did a great job taking advantage of that. But Syracuse, should have won that game, and we'll see. They'll have a chance to bounce back. But that's my stock down. And then stock up, I'm going to say Louisville because I was fairly high on them going in, but I wanted to see how some of the transfers, shaped in around. I'm really a big fan of Tyler Show. I think he's a good quarterback who has had some injury concerns, but he has shown his ability to throw the ball down the field. He has great arm talent, and the team was pretty efficient against Georgia Tech and did a solid job. Even when, Haynes King played well and brought the Yellow Jackets back in, Louisville took care of business. I think Louisville's probably, a clear-cut third best team in the league right now, and behind Clemson and Miami. But I think the Cardinals and Jeff Brom's second season are going to do some damage and could really challenge the league once again. And so stock up to them.
I'll give one more special shout out to Florida State.
Yay.
First win of the season.
Got the dub.
Always good to get a first one. After a disappointing outcome, after the best Twitter week in ACC football history, Florida State ruined it for everybody and won. But good for them. They're back on the wagon. Good for them.
Yeah, good. Yeah, you're right. Good for Florida State. It was a crazy start. 0-4 would have been really nightmarish, but they were able to pull it out. Got Alex Atkins back. I'll also say shout out to BC for another good win. I think they've been doing a great job under Bill O'Brien. So yeah, ACC play is going to fully start this week, I'm pretty sure, across the board for teams, including Duke, North Carolina. So it'll be fun times. A lot of storylines in the ACC, obviously with a 12-team playoff, so that'll be fun. But yeah, so check out all of our coverage this week. We have a special Centennial print edition. It's a magazine style, actually. That'll be on shelves Friday for anyone on campus. Definitely look at it. The Chronicle staff has been really working hard on celebrating 100 years of Duke. We have some cool stories from the past and present, just kind of looking back at the history of Duke. So that'll be available. And then on our website, we also have some great features. We did one on kind of the history of Duke UNC football, told through the lens of the Chronicle coverage, along with some news features on the Centennial. So check all of that out at dukechronicle.com. But yeah, thank you so much for listening. We'll be back after these games and preview the ACC slate for the Blue Devils. Thanks again to Caroline and Emma. But for Caleb Dudley, I'm Ranjan Jindal. This has been the Blue Devil Blitz.